Today we will be subtracting integers. So let's see what this looks like. This was following up our lesson yesterday on adding integers. So this is going to be a review. Yesterday we learned that when we have the same signs, add and keep, different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the bigger number, then you'll be exact. Same signs, add and keep. Here we have two negatives. So we add them, which would be 4 and 3 is 7, and we keep the sign, and that would be -7. Same signs, add and keep. Next one, let's see if you can think about this. I will pause while you're thinking. This is different signs. You have a +2 and a -6. Different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the bigger number. Since they are different signs, we have a +2 and a -6. We subtract 6 minus 2. Keep the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value, which is 6. So it would be -4. Different signs subtract. Keep the sign with the greatest absolute value. So that would be 3. Different signs. -7 has the greatest absolute value, so we keep its sign. We know it's going to be negative, so it'll be a -2. Same signs, we're going to add and keep the negative sign, so that would be a -16. Now, today for subtracting integers, we actually do not subtract integers. What we are going to do is we're going to add its opposite. We're going to be changing it to addition. Now, you may have learned from previous teachers that they call it click, click. Well, what that click, click is adding the opposite. So let's look at that. Here you have 6 minus a -4. So if you add the opposite, it means we're changing the subtraction sign to an addition sign. You're adding, and you're doing the opposite of a -4, and the opposite of a -4 is a +4. So some teachers say it as click, 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 click. You're adding the opposite. So when you see minus a negative, you can think of that as a giant plus sign. Mentally, you can change that into a giant plus sign, and you know you're actually going to add them. So when you do your click, click, or you're adding the opposite, or you're making your giant plus sign, you just have 6 plus 4, which is 10. There's your add the opposite. Okay, in our next example, we have a -3. You don't do anything to the first integer. The -3 is going to stay a -3. But then it says minus, and when you see a minus sign, -7, that is where you're going to add the opposite. So if we add the opposite of a -7 is a +7. So again, when you say minus a negative, think of it as a giant plus sign. Now what do you have? You have -3 plus a +7. Go back to our adding rules. Same signs, add and keep. Different signs. We have a -3 and a +7, so they are different signs. So you subtract and keep the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value. And 7 minus 3 is a +4. Okay, this is on your notes if you're taking notes. -53 minus 18. The first integer is a -53. That is not a minus sign. You do nothing to the first integer, but here where you see the subtraction sign, you're going to add, change that to addition, the opposite. We had a +18, now we have a -18. So if you add the opposite, or you do what some teachers call click, click, you're adding a -18. So let's see what that looks like. So when you only have one sign, you don't have this thing with a negative in front of it. Two negatives made a positive. But when you only have that one minus sign, you can think of it as one negative sign, and it's just negative. So if you add the opposite, you're adding a -18. Now look to see what you have with our adding rules. same signs. We have two negatives. Those are the same signs. So we add and keep the negative sign, which is a negative 71. This is also on your notes. We have 28 minus a negative 5. We're going to add the opposite, or do that click, click. When you add the opposite, it's like having a giant plus sign right here, and it changes that to adding a positive 5, which is 33. Negative 35 minus a negative 7. Negative 35, you do nothing to the first integer, but here we have minus a negative 7. So if we add the opposite, or do that click, click, it's making it plus a plus 7. So think of this as a giant plus sign. So that makes it negative 35 plus 7. Now we have different signs subtract. Keep the sign with the one with the greatest absolute value, so we know the final answer is going to be negative, because 35 is farther from 0 than 7, and that would be a negative 28. Okay, let's look at the next one. 77 minus a negative 1. If we add the opposite, or click, click, this thing becomes a giant plus sign. So that would make it 77 plus 1, which is 78. Now let's start looking at some algebraic expressions here. We have 7x minus 11x. We call these like terms. X is representing an unknown number. Since that unknown number is the same number for both terms, we can add those two terms together. So we do follow the same rules. When we have a subtraction sign, we're going to add the opposite, or do your click, click. This became a negative 11x. And if you just look at this, you can think of this right here as a negative 11x. But when you do your click, click, now you have 7x plus a negative 11x. And it looks just like this if you can visualize it that way. Now, you have different signs. They both have an x variable attached. Those are called like terms. Since they have the same variable attached, you can combine them. They are different signs, a positive 7 and a negative 11. So we're going to subtract and keep it negative because 11 is farther from 0. So that would be a negative 4x. That variable is still being multiplied times the same number, which is being represented by x. Combining like terms. Okay, here's another one, algebraic expression. Negative 10x minus a negative 5x. If we add the opposite, or do our click, click, this becomes a giant plus sign, and we have negative 10x plus 5x. Different signs. Well, first we notice that they're like terms because they have the same variable attached. They are different signs. One's negative, one is positive, so we subtract. 10 is farther from 0, so we know we're going to keep it negative. The answer would be negative 5x. On our next one, now we have 4 terms being added or subtracted together. So let's take this one step at a time. It says 2x minus a negative 3x. Well, there's our minus sign, so we're going to add the opposite. So that becomes 2x plus 3x. We have a minus 4, so we add the opposite, or do your click, click. Now we have a negative 4, and we add the opposite, so we have a negative 2. Now we can combine terms that are alike. So there's the answer. So let's see here. We have an x term, so we're going to combine 2x and a positive 3x right here, because when we did our click, click, this became positive. These are called like terms because they both had the same variable attached. And 2x plus 3x is simply 5x. These are also like terms because they have no variable attached. Those are called constants, and we can combine them. And you have a negative 4 plus a negative 2, which is a negative 6. So we put minus 6. So that answer is 5x minus 6, combining like terms. negative 10x minus 8 minus a negative 4x minus a negative 2. First, we're going to change all the minus signs and we're going to add the opposite. Negative 10x plus a negative 8 plus a positive 4x plus a positive 2. So I did my click, click. So now what I have is negative 10x plus a negative 8 plus a 4x plus 2. Now we look, so I'm going to erase all this stuff up here and show you what that looks like. So if you look up here, this was a negative 8. This became a positive 4x, and this became a positive 2. So we rewrote it like this. Now we look for like terms. We have a negative 10x and a 4x. We call these like terms because they both have the same variable attached. We have different signs. We have a negative 10 and a positive 4, so we'll subtract and keep the negative sign. That would be a negative 6x. These are constants. They are terms without variables. We can combine them. We have a negative 8 and a positive 2. Different signs, subtract, keep the sign of the greater value, so it would be a negative 6. So our final answer is negative 6x minus 6. (7x plus 6 minus 2x minus 11). 7x plus 6, now here's our first subtraction sign, so we're going to add the opposite. So now we have plus a negative 2x, and we're going to add the opposite, so we're going to have plus a negative 11. Our 7x plus 6 stayed the same. So that's all I did so far, was to change the minus 2x to a negative 2x. That is a negative 2x, and that is a negative 11. So now we combine like terms. We have a 7x and a negative 2x. They both have an x variable attached, so those are like terms. Different signs, so we subtract. 7 minus 2 is 5x. And then we have two constants, 6 and negative 11. Different signs, subtract, and that would be minus 5. So our final answer is 5x minus 5. 3x minus negative 2x. Click, click, add the opposite. This becomes a giant plus sign. And we have 3x plus 2x. They're both like terms, so our final answer is 5x. Negative 1 plus 2k minus 5k. Negative 1 plus 2k. Here's the first place we have to rewrite, so we add the opposite, or do our click, click. Now you have negative 1 plus 2k plus a negative 5k. Here are our like terms. Both have the variable k attached. The signs are different, so we subtract. So that would be negative 1 minus 3k. Now on my PowerPoint, I showed that as 3. I'll back up a little bit. Negative 3k minus 1. What I had written was minus 1 minus 3k. These actually would be the same thing, but in algebra, we always write something in standard form. So we always write the variable first, any terms with variables first, and the variables will be in alphabetical order. And then we put the constant at the end. So that's how we technically write it correct in algebra. All right, let's say you have $6 and you spend, it looks like, if I can move that, I can't move it, it looks like 7? I guess it's $7. If you have $6 and you spend $7, you had $6 and you spent $7. Well, if you add the opposite, now you have a positive 6 and a negative 7, you would now be $1 in the hole. Raise this up here. Because you spent more than you had, so now you are $1 in debt. Negatives mean you're in debt. Not a good thing. Let's say you're already $3 in debt. If you're already $3 in debt, that would be a negative 3 because being in debt is negative. And you then spend $5 more. So if I spend money, I'm also subtracting that again. how would you set up this problem? So you're already $3 in debt. That would be a negative 3. You spent $5 more, so that would be subtracting 5 more. So we have negative 3 minus 5. Now we add the opposite. Both are negatives, so negative 3 and negative 5 is now you are $8 in debt. You were in $3 in debt. Now you spent money you didn't have, and now you went further into debt. Not good. I hope this helps with subtracting integers.